In this episode of Mindful Moments, we're going to describe the emotional aggression cycle and some early warning signs of behaving in emotionally aggressive ways. So what is emotional aggression? The simple answer is that emotional aggression occurs when someone uses their own emotional states in an attempt to make other people responsible for their emotional well-being. Emotional aggression occurs anytime someone uses their emotional states in an attempt to manipulate other people. Statements such as, "I won't be happy until you act this way," or "you're wrong for feeling the way you do," are signs of emotional aggression. An emotional aggression cycle has definite phases that can be identified. When you know what those phases are, you can prevent incidents of emotional aggression before they start. Before we can talk about what these phases are, we first need to talk a bit about relationships. There are 4 basic types of emotional relationships you can have with other people. The first is a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, there may be a little conflict, but you're able to resolve it successfully, and you both respect each other's boundaries when doing so. For the most part, you get along and enjoy spending time with each other. The second type of relationship is a fused relationship. This type of relationship is often described as a smothering relationship. It's where one or both people feel that the other is too emotionally needy. This happens because one or the other person in the relationship is expecting the other one to take care of their emotional well-being for them. In other words, they're expecting the other to be responsible for their happiness. The third type of relationship is one with high conflict. In this relationship, conversations almost always lead to arguments and disagreements, and nothing ever gets resolved because you aren't hearing each other. The fourth and final type of emotional relationship is the emotional cutoff. In this relationship, every time you start trying to talk about emotional issues, the other person shuts down, or you shut down, or you both shut down. This type of relationship eventually leads to emotional numbness and apathy. Think about the emotional language you use to communicate with your family members or other loved ones. Is there a particular type of relationship that seems to dominate your conversations? Which of these patterns seems to translate to your own emotional language? That is, which patterns of interaction with family members seem to be your preferred way of interacting with others? These relationships create our predominant emotional language. Which of these seems to be the way you communicate the most with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers or acquaintances? We may use different styles with different people since we tend to have different relationships with different types of people. Are any of your emotional relationships leading you to behave in emotionally aggressive ways? Remember that emotional aggression means using your own emotional states as a way of manipulating others or trying to get them to be responsible for your own moods. Does one type of relationship seem to dominate with the ones who live with you? If you live alone, does one type of relationship seem to dominate with the family members you interact with the most? If so, that is your preferred method of interacting with loved ones. In most relationships where emotional aggression is present, there's usually one person who's a pursuer and the other who's the avoider. The pursuer usually wants more emotional interaction, while the avoider wants less emotional interaction. In emotionally secure relationships, there's a healthy balance between pursuit and avoidance. This means that in a healthy relationship, both people feel comfortable with their patterns of interaction concerning emotional issues. When emotional aggression occurs, it's usually because one person has withdrawn and the other person is demanding interaction. When this happens, the more the pursuing partner demands emotional interaction, the more the other partner withdraws. Eventually, this pattern of pursuit and avoidance results in one or both persons being emotionally fused or emotionally cut off. The harder the pursuer tries to engage, the more the avoider withdraws. When this happens, emotional aggression is often the result because neither partner is meeting the emotional needs of the other. The way out of this situation is to establish healthy boundaries and eliminate the need for emotional aggression. This is done by changing the ways you communicate with each other about emotional needs. Both partners learn to be responsible for their own emotional needs in such a relationship. Of all of the types of interaction listed previously, the fused relationship and the emotional cutoff mark opposite ends of the spectrum of emotional language. that can be graphed as you see on the screen. In the fused relationship, one or both partners are demanding more emotional interaction. In the emotional cutoff, one or both partners are demanding little or no interaction at all. When a balance is found between a fused relationship and a relationship that is emotionally cut off, there's a relationship with little or no conflict. The remaining types of relationship we listed earlier can fit anywhere on this spectrum. Two partners can have a little conflict when trying to move from a fused relationship to a relationship with no conflict. Or two partners can also have a little conflict when trying to move from an emotional cutoff to a relationship with no conflict. Two partners can also have a lot of conflict when trying to move from a fused relationship to a relationship with no conflict, or when trying to move from an emotional cutoff to a relationship with no conflict. And of course, two partners can also have a lot of conflict when trying to move from a fused relationship to a relationship with no conflict, or when trying to move from an emotional cutoff to a relationship with no conflict. In extreme cases, there is emotional, physical, or sexual abuse when attempting to strike a balance between these two extremes. The types of relationship may be graphed on the cycle. Although the cycle is not always present, it is common enough to be the predominant form of interaction when emotional aggression occurs. The steps of the cycle are as follows. 1 is a relationship with no conflict. In this phase of the cycle, both partners are getting along, and there's no difficulty in communicating about emotional issues. Phase 2 is a relationship with conflict. As tension builds, attempts at communication about emotional issues become more difficult. One person attempts to engage and the other attempts to withdraw. Tension is present, but most conflicts are resolved. However, there may be things that are left unresolved, and a fear of conflict on the part of one or both partners leads to these issues remaining unresolved. As unresolved issues continue to be swept under the rug, tension continues to build as these unsettled emotional issues continue to pile up. In extreme cases, this phase can lead to physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. In this phase, unresolved issues have become unbearable for one or both partners, so one or both act out in an episode of emotional aggression, and emotional abuse is the usual result. Phase 3 is the emotional cutoff. In this phase, one or both partners respond to the emotional aggression by extreme withdrawal. This may manifest in the silent treatment, in which partners refuse to discuss what happened. Phase 4, the cycle begins all over again, the fused relationship. After a cooling off period, one or both partners attempt to re-engage by begging for or demanding further emotional interaction, and the cycle begins again. The first step in changing your emotional language is to identify where you are in the cycle at any given time. The next step is to identify the triggers that lead to the next phase. By becoming aware of your triggers, you're able to respond in ways that lead to positive resolution of conflict instead of having to act out in emotionally aggressive ways. Think about the relationships you have had in the past with various family members, as indicated by the types of emotional relationships we've discussed. Can you identify the phases of emotional interaction that led to the relationships you currently have with those family members? Where are you on the cycle with each family member? What would it take to change those relationships to emotionally healthy ones with little or no conflict? What elements of your own emotional language would have to change in order to achieve an emotionally healthy relationship with various members of your own family? Maybe you have family members with whom it would be impossible to have a healthy relationship. In cases of physical, sexual, or extreme emotional abuse, if the other person is unwilling or unable to change, then the only option you have is to set healthy boundaries by letting the other person know that although you care about them, you cannot be responsible for their emotional well-being. If that's the case, what would it take for you to be able to accept that you cannot change them? If you set healthy boundaries with such individuals and they still refuse to cooperate by acting in emotionally healthy ways, then it may be that the only recourse you have is to end the relationship. If there are relationships in your life that are of this nature, what would it take for you to be able to accept that it may be time for you to end the relationship? Bear in mind that you can't change others, you can only change yourself. If you've done everything you can to change your own emotional language, and you're still having difficulties with other people in your life, the only choices you have are to change the way you think about the relationship, or to accept that they're not going to change. If they're not going to change and you've done everything you can to change the way you interact with them, then the only other option is to end the relationship until they choose to interact with you in emotionally healthy ways. Emotionally healthy interactions are interactions in which conflict is resolved without having to resort to emotional aggression. Such interactions can only be achieved through a mindful understanding of the emotional aggression cycle. That's it for this video. Next time we'll be talking about how your assumptions affect your perceptions and how your perceptions create your reality. Hi, this is Dr. Charlton Hall. I'm the Executive Director of the Mindful Ecotherapy Center. If you're enjoying our videos, please don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell to be informed when new videos are released. You can also learn more about the work of the Mindful Ecotherapy Center by visiting our website at mindfulecotherapy.org.